Hello, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Alliance Advocacy Workshop. Glad to have so many of you here. We will welcome to everyone who is here. Welcome to our monthly Alliance Advocacy Workshop. My name is Jasmine Gatlin. I am new to the Alliance and I am on the advocacy team as the national field organizer. Really grateful to be a part of this team and all of the great work that Tamina and others are leading across the Alliance to ensure that our advocacy efforts are continually increasing. Please feel free to use the chat to say hello, tell us where you are coming from. Um, During this session, we're very excited to have a special guest here with us that I will introduce in a moment as one of our panelists. Our session today is on cross-sector coalition building. And so we're going to discuss different sectors and how our advocacy efforts can be amplified through cross-sector coalition building. As we begin, I want to share a few housekeeping notes with you all, the Alliance's statements for participation. I'm going to read through these briefly. That here at the Alliance, we work to ensure that diverse voices are welcome and included as facilitators, attendees, and guests in all forums. Our organization has a zero tolerance policy for any form of discrimination or abusive behavior, and the Alliance is committed to ensuring that all its events are safe and respectful for all participants. Participants acknowledge that any form of discrimination, violence, or abusive behavior may result in removal from all forums depending on the situation. If any discrimination is witnessed or experienced during the webinar, or if you feel unsafe, please notify any member of the Alliance staff. And lastly, the National Alliance in Homelessness strives to create a diverse, inclusive, accepting, and safe space for everyone. So please feel free to use the chat box amongst one another and also to us, the host and the panelists. For any questions that you may have, there will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of our session. So please share your questions in the chat box and we will share them with the panelists to answer at the conclusion of the presentation. We will be able to share the PowerPoints that are prepared for our meeting today so that you can have further review. And this webinar will be recorded, so you have the opportunity to review it and share it with those who may benefit at a later time as well. Just to let you know, these are the things that we have available for tools for you to use for your advocacy work. We have our monthly bulletin that actually just went out this morning. Hopefully you all received that and had the opportunity to read about our Capitol Hill Day and things that we have coming up for August and beyond within the advocacy world. Of course, we have our monthly workshops, which we are attending right now. And then we have action alerts as well. The QR code here you are able to scan to stay connected to our advocacy work and all of the updates and ongoing efforts and actions that we will have as we continue to build. And so just want to share the upcoming advocacy workshops that are planned for the next 3 months. In August, as you all know, our advocacy workshops are on the fourth Thursday of each month. And so in August, we are looking to have turning one meeting into a long-term relationship. In September, we're talking about earned media and public pressure tactics for local advocates. And then October, we are going to be talking about how to influence GOP members through local conservative messengers. So really exciting topics and trainings that we have coming up and available for everyone as we continue to boost our advocacy efforts across the nation. And so for today's workshop, we will have our Director of Advocacy and Campaign Strategy, Tamina Chowdhury, leading us. And then joining her in conversation will be Austin Bates, who's a public policy analyst with the Arizona Housing Coalition, and also one of our state coordinators during Capitol Hill Day. I'm so excited to have him share about cross-sector coalition building as well. And I'm going to pass the floor to Tamina.
Thank you, Jasmine, for that wonderful introduction. And thanks everybody for being here today. Um, Today we're talking about cross-sector coalition building and why it's important, especially if we're trying to advance housing and homelessness solutions. So one of the biggest lessons communities have learned over the years is that homelessness cannot be resolved by any one organization or agency or a sector acting alone. Housing providers, healthcare systems, schools, businesses, veteran organization, faith leaders, and community advocates all over play a very important role. My goal today is to share some practical strategies for building strong partnerships that move beyond good intentions but can lead to meaningful action. Next slide, please. So, when we talk about homelessness, it's easy to think of it as a housing issue alone. But in reality, it's actually connected to almost every system in our communities. A person experiencing homelessness may also be navigating healthcare needs, employment challenges, educational disruptions, or access to benefits and support services. The same is true for families. Schools often identify housing stability before anyone else does. Hospitals see the health consequences when there's a high number of homelessness. Employers feel the impact through workforce challenges. And faith communities are frequently the first place people turn for help. The challenge isn't that these sectors aren't involved, it's that they're often working independently, almost like in silos. So, cross-sector coalition and collaboration helps connect those efforts into a more effective response. Next slide, please. So, why build coalitions? Well, because coalitions create influence that individual organizations often cannot achieve on their own. When leaders from multiple sectors speak with one voice, policymakers pay attention, funders pay attention, and the public pays attention. Coalitions also bring different resources and expertise and perspective to the table. So your policymakers are not only hearing from folks who work on housing and homelessness. Healthcare leaders can speak to health outcomes. Business leaders can speak about economic impact and employment rates. Educators can speak to the effects on students and families. Together, those voices create a stronger and more compelling case for change. Next slide, please. Not every coalition is effective. Some exist mostly on paper or meet regularly without producing results. Strong coalitions usually have a few things in common. First, they have a clear and shared purpose. Everyone understands what they're working toward. Second, people know their roles and responsibilities within the coalition. Just as important is that they invest in trust and relationship in addition to the structure, especially in the early stages when you're building that coalition. So, relationship building would be the foundation within which you would be building your coalition. And finally, strong coalitions prioritize communication and ensure that equity is woven into the decisions, leadership, and engagement. Next slide, please. So before building a coalition, it's important to identify who should be at the table. The sectors listed here are often critical partners. But the real question is, who are the specific people and organizations in your community impacted by homelessness? Who runs the major hospital systems? Who are the school district leaders? Which employers are influential? Which faith leaders are deeply connected to their residents? Coalition building is ultimately about relationships. Institutions, of course, matters and they're important, but people drive change. People in these sectors that you will be building relationship with. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the health sector. The health sector can be one of the strongest partners in homelessness work. Healthcare providers see the direct connection between housing instability and health outcomes every day. They also bear significant costs when people cycle repeatedly through the emergency rooms, hospitals, and crisis services. One effective approach is to frame housing as healthcare. Increasingly, healthcare systems are recognizing that stable housing can improve health outcomes while reducing costs. So when possible, look for opportunities to partner on pilot programs, for example, or supportive housing initiatives, or even data sharing efforts that can demonstrate the impact. Next slide, please. As you all know, schools are often on the front lines of identifying housing instability. Teachers, counselors, and McKinley-Vento liaisons regularly interact with students and families experiencing housing challenges. That gives education partners a unique perspective and an opportunity for early intervention. When engaging with schools, focus on student outcomes. Housing stability affects attendance, academic performance, engagement, and even graduation rates. Aligning around prevention strategies can help address challenges before families enter homelessness systems. Next slide, please. Now, as all of you know, the veteran sectors often offers the most valuable lessons in coordinated response to homelessness. Over the past decade or so, many communities have made significant progress reducing veteran homelessness through strong coordination among federal agencies that's working with local providers, housing authorities, and community partners. That success demonstrates that what's possible when systems work together with a clear goal and accountability. So when engaging veteran serving organization, look for ways to learn from their existing models, from their lessons learned, and identify opportunities to share resources and coordinate housing strategies. Next slide, please. Now, businesses may not always see themselves as housing partners initially, but they have a major stake in this issue. Housing affordability directly affects workforce stability, employee retention, recruitment, and local economic growth. The key is speaking their language. Rather than leading with social service terminology, frame homelessness and housing stability as economic and workforce issues. Businesses often want to help, but they need clear pathways for engagement, whether that's advocacy or funding, leadership, or even amplifying local initiatives. Think about how economic framing can help build relationship with businesses in your communities. Next slide, please. Now, we all know that faith communities have long been part of the response to homelessness. They often have deep community trust, strong volunteer networks, and a commitment to serving vulnerable populations. Many faith organizations are already providing food assistance, shelter, outreach, or emergency support to the homelessness population around them. The opportunity is to move from isolated efforts towards stronger integration with broader community systems. So, building authentic long-term relationships with your faith leaders, for example, can create powerful partnerships and expand community reach. Next slide, please. So, if you're starting from scratch, don't overcomplicate the process. It's actually rather simple. Begin with a shared goal. People are much more likely to collaborate with each other when they see a common purpose. Next, think about how you can identify key stakeholders and invest time in building one-on-one relationship with them. These conversations often reveal motivations, concerns, and opportunities that wouldn't emerge in a long or a larger group setting. Once you have built some alignment, bring people together intentionally and work toward shared messaging and coordinated action. Start small and grow thoughtfully and intentionally. Next slide, please. Now, like everything else, coalition building also has its challenges. But coalition work is rewarding, but it can also be challenging if you're not prepared. Different sectors have different priorities, timelines, and even ways of communicating. You may encounter power imbalances between organizations, competing interests, or even situations where participation is more symbolic than meaningful. The important thing is to recognize that these challenges are normal. Strong facilitation, clear expectations, transparency, and ongoing relationship building can help navigate many of these obstacles and challenges one can face. Next slide, please. So I want to start wrapping up here, but really want to talk about why are we coalition building? Why are we talking about cross-sector coalition building? Because we know that success isn't measured by how many meetings a coalition holds, but really like by the action it takes. It's seeing partners deliver consistent messages, advocate together, share responsibility, and coordinate efforts towards common goals is what makes a coalition, especially a cross-sectoral coalition, successful. It's also when organizations that once operated independently begin acting as a part of a broader movement. And perhaps most importantly, it's sustaining that engagement over time rather than relying on short-term momentum that the strength of your coalition would depend on. Next slide, please. So let me share some practical first steps that you all can do after this webinar today. I always encourage people to leave conversations like this with a few concrete next steps. Over the next month, identify 3 potential partners outside your usual circle. Schedule individual conversations with them. Introduce yourself and what do you do? Ask questions before making requests. Look for one issue where your interests overlap and then invite those partners into existing work that's already underway. Coalition building doesn't have to start with a large event. It can start with building relationships and small wins that build trust over time. Next slide, please. So as I wrap up today, I want to leave you with one simple takeaway. Ending homelessness requires aligned systems, not isolated efforts. No single organization has all the resources, expertise, or influence needed to solve this challenge alone. The good news is that many of our partners we need are already working in your communities. So the opportunity is to bring those efforts together around a shared purpose. So my challenge to all of us today is to build beyond your sector, invest in relationships, and look for opportunities that lead to collaboration. And that's where you'll find the lasting change, is where the lasting change happens. Thank you. With that, I will conclude, and I'm going to pass it to Austin Bates to talk about some real-world examples of cross-sector coalition building. Austin?
Thank you so much. And just going to double check. Can you see my screen here? Okay. Let me make sure I get set up so I can see my screen. That's always helpful. All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Tamina, for having me. I 100% agree with everything you just said. That really sums up in 15 minutes what the experience has been of the Arizona Housing Coalition. And it's great to be here with everybody. I saw a whole bunch of folks from all over the country in the chat. Allentown, PA. I went to school in Lancaster, so I love to see that. I saw a couple of Phoenix and Tucson folks, so great to see y'all. Saw some other folks from North Carolina. I was just in North Carolina too. So it's really cool seeing everybody and glad we're all here together to talk about this important topic. A little bit about me. My name is Austin Bates. I work for the Arizona Housing Coalition as a public policy analyst. I got a interesting couple of experiences professionally over the past few years, and it's really ranged in a lot of different ways. And I'm excited to try to bring that and kind of put it all together and help everybody out here, and as best as I can. So for me, I started in voter turnout. From there, I went to the Department of Economic Security in Arizona, which is basically the state agency that helps folks with EBT, medical assistance, cash assistance, TANF, things like that. So I was the one actually doing the interviews, walking people through that process. From there, I went on to government performance auditing. So I would help do state performance audits, different state agencies, and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. From there, I went to constituent services and then community engagement. So someone was calling the governor's office in Arizona and yelling at them. They were yelling at me. And I really loved it, right? I love it when folks are passionate and they care, because that means that, change is probably going to happen soon. And then community engagement, I was working in early childhood. And from early childhood, and then moving into housing and homelessness, there's such a great connection right there between a lot of trauma that folks experience in their early years. And so I always try to bring that up as much as possible, because I know trauma-informed care is such a difficult thing, but such a worthwhile thing as well. And then the past few years, I've really been working in legislative affairs and coalition building. So like Tamina said, and Jasmine said, I led the state delegation for Arizona this past two weeks ago. It's hard to believe it was just 2 weeks ago over in DC. And we met with a couple members of Congress and their staff. We had great conversations about that. And then just personally, food. Phoenix has kind of blown up the past few years. I know I got this picture up here, this open wide road, but Phoenix is actually the 5th biggest city in the country now. So we've got a big food scene that's coming up, and so I really try to explore restaurants when I can. Family is really important to me. Family first is something that was kind of drilled into me as I was growing up. And then cars. I think unfortunately I'm becoming a car guy. My dad was he had a shop, right? So growing up, I was always kind of around cars. I wasn't really working on them much. And then lately, it kind of bit me that I started to understand what this whole car thing was about. And so now I'm like going to become a stereotypical Arizona car person. But that's a little bit about me. Moving on to the Arizona Housing Coalition and kind of why we're here to talk about this. So the Arizona Housing Coalition is a nonprofit organization in Arizona that's a merge between homeless organization and housing organizations. So actually, it started kind of what Tamina was talking about here. They identified that there was a gap in the way that we were talking about housing and homelessness in Arizona, and they thought that it would be more effective if the state had a statewide organization that really blended the two together, and that's the Arizona Housing Coalition. Our objective is to end homelessness and increase access to safe and affordable housing. And really, the process that we go by to do that, we have a couple of different things. We have the Arizona Veterans Stand Down Alliance. So we have groups across the state that put together resource fairs for veterans. The Arizona Housing Coalition hosts the Maricopa County Veterans Stand Down Alliance event, which is one of the nation's largest. I think last year we served 1,300 to 1,500 veterans, many of them homeless. We have a lot of professional development programming for folks that work in the industries and work in the sectors. We have an annual conference, so not at the same size as NEH's conference, obviously, but we have a nice little annual conference we put on at the state. And then we do a lot of advocacy and coalition building. In Arizona, there's a lot of different splinters when it comes to rural, urban, and tribal. So trying to be that one convener and be a really top-down force doesn't really work. It works a lot better if you're trying to do something that's a little bit more grassroots, that supports the people that know their communities and are doing it in the way that works in their communities in the right way. So moving forward, real quick into this, I like to really kind of keep things as simple as possible. My dad had a shop, my mom was a teacher, so simple as possible, right? I think is the best way to learn. And I always kind of go back to this about what is a coalition in itself. A coalition is a temporary alliance of distinct parties, persons, or states for joint action. I think the temporary alliance part is really important there. Distinct parties, persons, or states for joint action, of course, is very important. So you have the temporary part, right? It's for a specific issue, and your goal is to accomplish that objective. Distinct parties, persons, or states. So, folks, it should be unique, right? We should have things that fill skill gaps, that fill influence gaps, fill stakeholder gaps. And then joint action. It's coming together and collaborating around action and change itself. And you put all that together, you get a simple definition that has a lot in it. Excuse me. Why do we build coalitions? Going back to that, again, super simple, to accomplish an objective, right? The Arizona Housing Coalition has an objective, and that's to end homelessness in Arizona and increase access to safe and affordable housing. Ending homelessness, we can hit functional zero. That's something we can definitely do. Increasing access to safe and affordable housing, we're going to always be doing that, but we're going to make sure that there's a system in place that's doing it so that it's not just a forever goal, but it's a goal that actually has an end because the system accounts for what we need and is able to fill that gap and is able to accomplish that objective. Going back to what Tamina was talking about in terms of what are the benefits of a coalition. So just repeating what Tamina had said, you have greater political and public will. You've got broader credibility and legitimacy. You have access to new resources and decision makers, stronger, more holistic solutions. I come from a sports background. The way I talk about it always is team. You have teammates that fill skill gaps in necessary areas, whether you're any type of sports ball fan or you're a music fan or whatever it may be, any team is always going to have folks that have these unique skill sets. And when they come together and they collaborate and they have that moment of connection, that's when the magic happens. That's when you start scoring goals. That's when you start, Steph Curry chucking up threes. That's when you start scoring touchdowns. That's when you start getting incredible concerts and music performances. But in all cases, it's these teams that have these skill gaps and they fill them with folks that have the talent to be able to accomplish the total objective when they're working together. And that to me is really the benefit of a coalition. So if you're in a coalition and you're just kind of axing people out and you're not letting their light shine, you're not really letting the coalition thrive as much as it otherwise could. And that's something that I'm really trying to bring that perspective to the Arizona Housing Coalition. We might disagree on things every now and then, different folks within the coalition, but I always want to make sure that that shining light is the thing that we're really centering around. So I have a couple historical examples here. These are big, broad examples. I think it's important to note that when we're talking about the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights era, it wasn't just this massive national movement, right? There's international things happening. Of course, there's the national movement, but at the local level, the national movement was only possible because there were so many local coalitions. And oftentimes, these local coalitions had faith leaders, labor and union leaders, community leaders, civil rights leaders, student leaders, and business leaders. Different parts of the country were stronger in different things. And when they all came together, that's when you get something like the March on Washington and you get the signing of the Civil Rights Act. So, building that local coalition is what allowed these larger coalitions to happen. And I'm going to go further back now because it's America's 250th and we've been talking about it all year. I think the American Revolution is a great example of coalition. And I also just bring it up because I really think coalition building is American as apple pie, as baseball, whatever, whatever you want to use right there. But the American Revolution was business leaders, faith leaders, community leaders, military leaders from the different colonies all coming together and declaring independence, right? So I just use the American Revolution, the Civil Rights era, as examples of that. And if we go even further back, the One Ring and Lord of the Rings, and this is just a joke, but the joke really is the truth in the sense that coalitions are about folks that have different skill sets and are coming together to accomplish a specific objective. So I like the Lord of the Rings because it's a great example in terms of this overarching force of almost like evil nature that folks are really having a hard time dealing with. And they're able to come together because they have these different unique skill sets. And it is a fantasy story, right? But it makes you feel good. And honestly, Civil Rights Act, right? I think that's a bit of a fantasy story in a way, in a sense. I remember when I was growing up, Barack Obama being elected president was something that was shocking to me being a black man in America, being a black kid. I know the Civil Rights Act, talking to my grandpa about it, shocking to him. You just think things won't change, and then they do because people come together and they make the change happen. So my favorite coalition, kind of going back to the fictional here, one of my favorite coalition examples is the Justice League. That Justice League is like Batman, Superman, all these folks that come together. And it's just a good example because these are superheroes that individually have incredible powers, but they need each other to truly thrive. So when we talk about homelessness, when we have staff that are just incredible at what they do in that one-to-one level, but they might not know how to talk to a lawmaker, that's where I can come in and say, hey, let me try to help you facilitate this conversation with this lawmaker so that you understand what their perspective is and you can give them your perspective in a way that they understand it, right? And I saw that at the last conference in DC when we did our advocacy day. I really saw someone that I felt like throughout the day got more and more confident, going from a person that worked in the system every day to being a person that advocated for people in the system every single day. And so kind of going back to Justice League and superheroes, that's the job of different folks within a coalition, is to make sure that their talents are shining and to make sure that other people, we're allowing their talents to shine and we're helping their talents shine. So I'm going to give some actual examples here, so we're not just talking about Lord of the Rings. Verde Valley, Arizona, the Verde Valley Community Development Organization, I think, I just talked to them the other day about this. They're doing an incredible job in Arizona. If you know a couple things about Arizona, you probably know that we've got the Grand Canyon, we've got some scenic landscapes, we've got Phoenix, Scottsdale, a couple cities. You might have heard of Sedona. So Sedona, Prescott, these are these really beautiful areas of the state where a lot of folks have retired. But at the same time, we have a lot of tourism in the area. And then we have a lot of young families that work in the tourism industry, the service industry, and other industries in the area, construction, whatever it may be. So with that, they kind of struggle talking about housing and homelessness. There's a lot of community pushback around, we don't want things to develop and change, which makes sense from perspective, right? Because you might have worked your entire life to be able to buy a place in Sedona or Prescott, and now you just want to enjoy nature. So you don't want to see trees get knocked down. You don't want to see new development go up. And you don't want to get more taxes because you have a fixed income. And so it kind of makes sense when you think about it from that perspective. So it's really difficult for a coalition then to kind of form and really address that. But that's what they've done. They put together a coalition of business leaders, building leaders, local government leadership, nonprofit leaders, and all these folks have gotten together. And the leader of that Verde Valley organization, they've hosted individual and community conversations to build relationships. So that's something Tamina talked about, was starting the one-to-one relationship building. I thought they did a great example, but they're a great example of that because within each one of these sectors that they knew that they needed to be able to build more housing in the area, they had to go and have the one-to-one relationship first. So once they got that one-to-one relationship, that's when they convened everybody together. That's when they said, hey, who else do we need in the room? And because they had those strong relationships, they're able to keep making connections. What I also thought was really impressive about their work was that they developed an internal strategic plan. A lot of times, I think coalitions get stuck on the strategic part. So they've got the folks in the room. Now what? Well, they actually went and they developed an internal strategic plan. They identified regional needs, and they ended up producing relevant resources for partners. An example of that, they worked with the county to develop a developable land map. So that's something that I'd love to see expanded across Arizona, where every county has a developable land map, so that we're just having a consistent conversation about, hey, where's the land that's developable? What can we do in terms of affordable housing? How do we make this work? And it gives you a good starting place. To do that, they convene regional leaders to develop these focus areas and these priorities. And that convening is what's now guiding the regional collaboration around workforce housing development. So all in all, I think they've done a great job with that. Their current effort is really the NIMBY versus YIMBY conversation, right? And so going back to that, it's going to be one-to-one relationship building with folks to understand why they don't want development in their area. And then it's going to be one-to-one relationship building with folks to say, hey, if you want development, you want more affordable housing, you want to have a workforce in this area, you want to have tourism, you want to have healthcare, hospitals, early childhood, teachers, whatever it may be, just your bartender at your local bar, then you have to be able to build some type of housing. And we need to have folks that are able to use their voice and speak up about that. And that's where we get to have good dialogue and debate, and we hopefully find a good compromise and we get some development going. So I just thought this was a great example in the workforce housing realm. Moving on, Maricopa County is the state's largest county, and they've got a really interesting eviction prevention pilot. And I was just talking with one of the people that's leading this effort the other day. It started from a local anti-poverty organization, and this person they applied for a grant to begin a systems change effort focused on eviction prevention, but they didn't have 20 years of experience in this. So it was great talking with them because I learned about why they got involved in the effort in the first place. And it was really a good human moment because I was able to learn about the experiences they had while trying to help folks that were getting evicted and how those experiences really stuck with them. And it reminded me a lot of my days when I was in constituent services. When I think about mental health right now, I always come back to this memory I have of working with this young girl that was calling and she was asking for our help because she didn't know what to do, right? And she was crying on the phone. She wasn't sure about the health options being made available to her. And she was so frustrated and so upset that she felt like the governor's office was the last place in the first place that she needed to call, right? So that's something that always sticks with me. And hearing that story from that person really helped me understand why they were doing what they were doing. And it was really great to hear that, right? It really kind of helped level me as well. What they did is they had those same conversations that I had with her with other people. They hosted individual and community conversations. They built trust with high influence stakeholders such as judges, elected officials, business leaders, multifamily housing organizations, landlords, and nonprofit organizations. When you think about eviction, oftentimes the bad guy in that scenario is the landlord. It's the multifamily housing organization. So what they did is they went and they had those one-to-one conversations, and they learned that the landlords and multifamily housing organizations, they also didn't want to be the bad guy. They don't want to be perceived as the bad guy. And they didn't want to be the bad guy in the sense that they didn't actually want to be evicting people. They lose money when they evict people, right? They want to have like a reputable business standard. They don't want to be slumlords. They want to be known as professionals throughout the state. They want to have continued development and investment from the state. So they want these positives for their industry to continue growing. And if they're perceived as the bad guy, and if everyone hates them, that's not going to be the case, right? So she had that learning conversation with them. And through that, they were able to convene stakeholders and they created a working group. They ended up applying for another grant. They received funding to continue the project. And they actually had champions within the working group that helped facilitate local government participation. Now, Maricopa County has a pilot program focused on eviction prevention. Right now, their next steps, making sure that the program runs as efficiently and effectively as possible so that they can make the case for additional investment. So there's still some barriers there, right? But because they did such a good job in the relationship building phase, that they were able to bring high influence stakeholders to the table. And with that, they were able to get buy-in from local government, and that local government buy-in turned to a pilot program in one of the US's largest counties. So really, really proud of that work. I love to hear about that. And again, having that conversation from the top level about, hey, what are you doing? to the bottom level of why are you doing it really help me understand their perspective, and is going to help me support them in the future. And that kind of takes us to the Arizona Housing Coalition. So if you're an organization on the call that already has a group of people that are involved in the work that you do, I think there's a question about how do we actually support these local organizations and their coalition building efforts. Sorry about that. The way I go about it is really 5 steps, and I kind of just use these as my guiding principles in my work every day. So authentic curiosity. When you worked in politics and you work in policy, you're going to come across people with different perspectives. It's not important for you to necessarily judge people at the first level. It's the most important thing is for you to listen, and for you to listen to learn. So if you can't understand someone, then you're not going to be able to actually debate with them. You're not going to be able to discuss with them, and you're definitely not going to be able to connect with them. So I'm always trying to be authentically curious when I'm talking to folks, and I'm trying to listen to learn about them. Gap assessments. So actually doing the research is really important, and that's really going to help you make sure that your coalition is effective later down the line. Researching for outcomes is kind of the thing that I tie to gap assessments. So if I know that we want to get some bill passed, I know that we need to look at these folks over here. We need to develop relationships with them right now, even though this bill might not be passed for 5 years, right? Because those are the folks that are going to carry the torch 5 years from now, especially if the housing coalition has moved on, or we're not existing, or I'm not in this role anymore. We want to build folks for long-term change. And that's, again, researching for outcomes. What do we need to do to make sure that there's a short-term, medium-term, and long-term change? And how do we make sure that we're building for that? The way to actually connect with folks, that third step here is connecting to shared values. So I try to really respect people's lives. There are people that I disagree with completely on their perspective on these problems, but I just try to understand, what about your life experiences make you think the way you do? And that's really the most important thing I can do in this moment. I don't disagree with you. The least I can do at least is respect your opinion on it. Appreciate the fact that you're coming to the table and you're trying to make a change, even if I don't believe the change you're trying to make is positive. And, we actually agree on that. So we both agree that we want to change. And we actually usually agree on the outcome. We probably just don't agree on the process for it. So if we agree on 2 of those 3 things, we might be able to find a middle ground somewhere in the process, and then we can get some incremental progress there. And while that's not, doesn't feel good in the moment as much, over 5 years, if you go step by step and you build incremental progress, that consistent progress is going to lead to long-term systems change. The 4th thing, provide resources. So as a coalition, what I'm really trying to do is just be useful, be valuable. Those organizations that I just talked to, there's a couple of things I need to do to follow up with them to make sure that I'm a valuable partner to them. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act just passed at the federal level. I need to get down and really start doing some research on that and put together a whole bunch of different documents to make sure that folks in the coalition understand as much as possible how they can take advantage of it. On the homelessness side, with the COC funding, all those changes, make sure that we're being as useful as possible when it comes to advocacy and it comes to other items that are high priority needs for their clients and the people they serve. And then kind of last thing here is uncover that North Star. So we all really have this shared purpose here. I think what I can do best as a coalition staff is help others to tell their stories. I'm going to be best and do best when other people are taking lead, because those are the folks that people are going to listen to. I cannot go to rural Arizona and say, hey, you need to do this, 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 this. It's disrespectful to come in there when someone's lived there for 20, 30 years and they've got a certain culture and a way of doing things. And for me to try to change that overnight, people don't take kindly to that. So what I can try to do is help folks that I have some shared values with that live in rural Arizona. Okay, how can we make this change happen in a way that aligns with the community and also aligns with the shared outcomes and the shared values that we want? And I do that in all different parts of the state, especially in tribal regions of the state. Arizona has a lot of different tribal areas. That's got to be the most important thing, is really taking a back seat and supporting where the support is asked, requested, and needed, and acknowledging and respecting people's sovereignty and their autonomy and their agency, right? And the best way I know how to do that is to help others tell their stories. And that's really what I see as coalition building. So on my last thing here, I'll just say this. My favorite real coalition, we talk about American Revolution and talk about civil rights. We talk about all these big, grand things that we're trying to do. But coalition building really starts at the local level. So kind of going back to the Justice League and superheroes, my dad's going through some medical issues right now. And he was pretty down in the dumps a couple of weeks ago. And my cousin called and asked if we wanted to go see He-Man which is an 80s cartoon remake. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It was a fun movie. It was a pretty good time. But my cousin knew my dad liked it, and so she knew that we like to go see movies. So she called and asked if we want to see it. My girlfriend hadn't seen it before, so she was kind of like being initiated into the world of He-Man, which is like a very comical 80s crazy cartoon. My dad grew up on it, so he loved it. But seeing that my dad shout and cheer at one point during the movie because he was so happy about whatever happened in the scene, that was like a really special moment for me. And it really just reminded me about how individual moments at the local level are the most important things when it comes to building coalitions. So work is obviously essential, right? But being able to talk to your neighbor, being able to talk to your family member, being able to talk to your friend about an issue, and then being able to kind of apply that same authentic mindset in terms of curiosity and just wanting to support and wanting to find that middle ground and make progress. That's what people really, that resonates with people when you're doing it at a professional level too, in terms of coalition building. So I guess I would just leave on coalition building. For us to get to DC and make the changes we want to make, we have to start at the local level. And that means respecting folks. It means helping them uncover their North Stars, sharing stories, and really just being of use to folks in these times of need. And that's what I have for my presentation. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been an honor talking with you all. I think we have some questions and answers time. So I will stop running.
Awesome. Great presentation, Austin. Clapping for you across the Zoom verse here.
Thank you.
Clapping for both you and Tamina for all that you all shared regarding coalition building. We do have a few questions. The first question that I'm going to ask you all, it's actually for you, Austin. It says, do you know what kind of eviction prevention plan that they came up with? This is from Sharita Tinhoff.
Sharita, I actually asked for the specific grant information yesterday, and they're going to email it to me today. Maybe I could share it with Tamina and Jasmine after this. And I don't know if there's a follow-up email because I thought it was so interesting, and I hadn't really heard about that. But I love that there's a national effort going on, and that's the great thing about just asking questions. You end up learning so much about these things. So I'll try to share that with them so they can share it with you. Does that work for you all?
Sounds good. Definitely send it
Thank
to
you.
us and we will share it out broadly. Another question for you all is how do you maintain momentum and engagement once the coalition is established?
That's a tough one. Tamina, do you want to go at it, or
Mhm.
do you want me to go?
Sure, I can take a stab at it.
All right.
So, um, I mean, honestly, these days there's such a need for coalition building. I don't see a scenario where um, there's not enough energy for people to participate in pushing policymakers to do the right thing. No matter what your sector is, what your focus and expertise is. But in a scenario where, things are pretty good, I would say like frame it as a part of our democratic process. The way policy and decisions are made in this country is that there's room created for citizens to engage with their members and to influence and inform them so the members are making the right decision that impact their lives. And if we don't participate in that process, then we lose out. So, in order for us to have a fair and just society, period, we always need to be engaging and paying attention to what our decision makers that we send them in Capitol Hill or wherever that might be are how are they making their decisions and how are those decisions impacting you? Because politics is personal. Policies are personal. It's not just happens to community, it happens to all of us individually. So not doing anything, I don't think that's an option.
And also in terms of having folks stay engaged, because there's so many competing interests. I mean, we live in a society that draws your attention in a multifaceted amount of ways. And so it is making the work lighter than feeling heavy. there's so many things that can like drown us and bring us down. But what are the things that fuel us? And so if that means that when you're developing coalitions, one of the great things about combining with these different sectors, as they talked about, faith-based business, et cetera, is that they have different incentives that alongside of the work that we are doing, if it's connected to a value system where you are meeting at, your local congregation, or if you are meeting within a volunteer group or another advocacy group where you're making it fun, where you're doing like a book club per se on it, where you're talking about the issues, but you're also making it something that people can live into. If that's, breaking bread together or going for a walk and talking about these issues and things of that nature, oftentimes make the work of advocacy more enjoyable rather than feeling like, per se, another business meeting that add to how coalitions tend to thrive and sustain because you're building real relationship on top of doing necessary good work, like how Tamina just shared. Austin, you want to share anything before we go to the next question?
Yeah, I would just say I completely agree with both of you. I threw a Lord of the Rings joke in there because like I don't want to talk for 20, 30 minutes without making one joke. Because it's morbid what we talk about every day. It's really difficult, honestly. And I got to keep the spark alive in my life, in my professional career, and keep going, right? So that we can keep doing the work. And so I try to find places of joy. I think something that can be difficult is when you're in a room that's so demoralized that they don't know where to start. And in those spaces, I totally agree where you just need to find something that's the smallest thing. And that could be getting together for coffee and just sharing stories. And it doesn't have to be even talking about the issue at hand. It could just be talking about something else. What's important, I would say, though, is to have a strategy about
Yeah.
how you're going to turn those meetings and conversations into something over time. And that's something I think the Verde Valley did a really good job of. I can't replace 10 years of relationship building, right? But what I observed is that they have 10 years of strategic relationship building, right? And that's what's led them to having these high influence folks in the room.
Yeah. Awesome. Another question that we received is specific to you, Austin. Does your coalition organize around task or task force or one goal per year?
That's a great example. So right now, actually, what I'm going to do after this call is we have 3 policy work groups. And what I like to do is for us to have a consistent system to make sure that we're getting folks input and we're turning those ideas into policies. So we have right now homelessness prevention, homeless response system, and then affordable housing. And we're going to have a policy work group for each one of those things. We'll have 3 meetings throughout the year, July, August, September. And folks will just talk about where we are as a system, where do we want to go, and how do we get there, right, for each one of those buckets. So it's a lot of work right now because it's our first time doing it. Hopefully it doesn't blow up and it leads to some good things. But if we get half of what I want done, then I think that'll be a win for next year. And again, just making the effort is going to do good for us in the long term.
There's no blowups that will happen, only successful things.
Only
Uh,
success.
Last question as we get ready to wrap up. And thank you all so much again for your time on this afternoon. We want to close with this question. If you could offer one piece of advice to someone trying to build a cross-sector coalition in their community, what would it be and why?
Maybe I can go first, Tamina, and then you can close. Sure. I think being curious, it's really hard sometimes to see the connection between different things. I've got these different professional experiences that's helped me see that all these people are connected in different ways, but not everybody has that, right? So I think just starting from a place of curiosity, if you go to a meeting and there's a business person there, I would just ask them why they're there, and just talk to them and just have kind of have a couple normal conversation with them. And when you do that like enough times, you'll start seeing, oh, like there's a trend here where business folks think about this or faith folks think about this. And that's kind of where you can start finding the connection. And it makes it a little bit easier over time to start building the why behind why everybody is in the room. And then it's easier to really put together a strategy once you kind of understand that. But it takes time and it just takes really authentic curiosity, in my opinion.
That's
So,
a really good answer. One thing I would add is uh, don't assume just because they're coming from a business sector or a law enforcement sector that they're going to be hostile or unfriendly or oppose the work you do. Just give people first the benefit of the doubt. And as Austin said, be curious, ask them questions. And you'd be surprised what happens when people connect with each other at a human level. And that's what we do here at Housing and Homelessness issues, is that we are talking about humans and the quality of lives they should have. So connecting human, just thinking about it as a human to human connection is really a good way to go about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, Austin and Tamina, for all that you have shared today. I hope this was helpful to those of you who are here across the Alliance. We will share the slides and the recording of this webinar for you to continue to review and implement some of these good strategies that they have shared today. And we look forward to seeing you all again on August 27th for our next webinar. Have a great one, everyone.